asked by Teresa to come here and share my history and my story about being raised in the Quaker traditions. Now, there's two kinds of Quakers. There are the traditional ones from the Philadelphia area that I'm a part of, and then there is a newer branch that is more of a basic Christian evangelical church, and they have clergy and they have sermons and they actually call it a church. And I have never been to one of those because I have never been to one, so I don't know anything about that. I grew up in the very traditional Philadelphia style, which I will describe to you. The one thing I do know about the other branch is that Richard Nixon was one of those kind of Quakers. The Philadelphia Quakers are a small set, quiet, private, plain. We do not proselytize. We are the polar opposite of hip and cool, and we are gently fading away into history, as did the Shakers, which was a similar austere religious group that was so austere that the men and women were housed separately. There was no conjugal anything, no marriage, so oops, no future generations. We are often confused with the other Plain folk. Plain has a capital P. The Amish and Mennonites were also Plain. They also settled in the Pennsylvania area. They are Pennsylvania Dutch, which is an Anglicization of Deutsch. They're German settlers, and they were seeking a rural, back to the roots, farm-type existence. They're Quakers and the Puritans and several other sects of the time were English and Welsh, and they leaned more towards the white-collar professions, and they were valued education. And these two groups were very distinct. Of course, America's a melting pot, and there's a whole lot of people that came here. I am half and half. Mom's lineage is Quaker, Dad's family were gay Dutch, gay meaning colorful and lively, and the gay Dutch painted hex signs on their barns to ward off the evil spirits, and my grandmother would take me out in the gloaming to go look at the fairies, and we often found them. And they were just very bright, lively people that liked music and dance and bright colors, as opposed to the Plain Dutch, which were the Amish and the Mennonites. Now, my Dutch great-grandfather was a coal miner. That was his canteen, that is his little tin lunch pail, and this was his mining helmet. This little oil lamp was filled with fish oil, and so it's a canvas hat with a leather brim, and the leather brim is there so the fish oil doesn't singe off his eyebrows. Yeah, OSHA approved. Isn't that what? This is an actual mining helmet that my grandfather wore, my great-grandfather. Now, on the other side of the family, that great-grandfather had a small real estate business in downtown Norristown on Main Street. This was a sign, and my grandfather used to take me down to the little tiny courthouse in Main Street, Norristown, which is where Bill Cosby was recently tried, so that was in the news. But I used to go down there all the time with my grandfather, and we would file the deeds for the houses that he sold. So two very different cultures, one very white collar and one very blue collar, and they made me. And I value both of them, and they couldn't be more different. This great-grandfather owned the very first automobile in all of Norristown, and this was a big deal. It was a Model A. It was a beautiful, shiny black automobile, and of course it had no chrome because Plain. We don't do chrome. So, but it was a beautiful car, and they were very proud. I'm going to use the word God here through this talk to indicate spirit. Arthur C. Clarke wrote a book called The 9 Billion Names of God. There are 9 billion names, and it is still the same essence. Wars have been fought, blood has been spilled over which name. That I agonize over this word, not wanting to offend or exclude anyone, is very Quaker of me. And I'm going to talk about the roots of Quakerism from the point of view of these first Quakers. I am not saying that they're right or wrong. I sure don't want anybody to convert. Quakers aren't even allowed to go there, but I just want to give you the story from their point of view. So, you know. It all started in 1600s England with a poor working class kid named George Fox. A rabble-rouser and a religious seeker and a troublemaker, George felt that the clergy, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the king were all in cahoots to keep consolidating power and money by convincing the average man that he needed these clergy to intervene to speak to God on his behalf, and for that service, the average Joe had to support the clergy and the monarchy's lavish lifestyle. Well, George was not buying into this. He was not having it. He went back to the original words of Jesus. A simple man who espouse simple truths: love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek, thou shalt not kill, no false gods or graven images. You will never find a cross, a crucifix in a Quaker meeting house. Care for the needy. Okay, George could get behind this. This made sense to George. And he wanted to start a religion based on these original words, but the apostles and their followers had created clergy and churches and layers of hierarchy, and they had translated Jesus' simple messages and built a power structure that obscured the simple truth that we are all God's children and we are therefore all equal. Now George intuited this, but he did not have proof. So he searched and he questioned and he pondered, and he was a real nuisance until one day he simply gave up. Sitting alone in silence and in stillness, he accepted maybe he would never know, that maybe it was just enough to just be. In this passive emptiness, this silent void, George heard a voice coming from deep within him and yet everywhere. The still small voice of God. This was George's epiphany. He called the voice the inner light. Well, George gathered his friends in a plain meeting house, and they all tried out this new thing, this silent meditation, and one after another, they heard the voice too. This was very exciting. Of course, meditation had been used by many people for millennia, but George didn't know that. He didn't have the Google, he couldn't punch in the Dalai Lama or hot yoga. He had to find it himself, and he did. So he had discovered silent meditation, and that's what they used because it worked. And that's what we still use, is this silent, still meditation. And it's a listening, not so much asking. And all the kinds of meditation that I've discovered in spiritualism has greatly expanded my vision, but I still go back to that quiet, silent meditation that I learned when I was a little kid. Well, what really hit these guys was that Jesus is the Son of God, but George was the Son of God, and you're the Son of God, and you're the daughter of God, and we're all the children of God, and we're all equal, and we all have the inner light within that connects us to the infinite. And this was his Oprah moment. He just got it. And so everything that he built came from the simple truth that we can all talk to God. We just have to sit and talk to God. And we still call ourselves friends. We still meet in very plain meeting houses, and we still use this silent meditation technique. We have no clergy or hierarchy. We don't need them because we recognize that we can all talk to God. So anyone can stand a meeting to share a spirit. As trans-channeling or clear messages, you would really recognize all this. However we receive is fine, and we just stand up and we give witness. Now, my great Aunt Sarah used to recite flowery odes to her little dog Rags, and the kids would love this, but my austere grandmother would raise an eyebrow, and Aunt Sarah would just prattle on about her dog, and then after service, grandmother would sit us kids down and make us memorize Tennyson. Why Tennyson? I have no idea. The charge of the Light Brigade into the Valley of Death rode the 600. Spoiler alert, they all die. It's bloody carnage. Even the horses die. Grandmother loved Tennyson. Don't really know why. She's probably around here right now taking notes, and she's going to give me what for later. When I get up there, she's going to be there with a clipboard going, hey, I'd like you to meet Lord Tennyson. He's right here, you know. I'm going to have that moment. Okay, it's a really good poem. It's about duty and honor and courage and all those things, but it was pretty bloody for a kid. Quakers were unlikely radical political activists. George's epiphany was equality, the divine light in everyone. This plus the church and the king being irate over these Quakers not recognizing the Church of England or divine right of king, or especially therefore not feeling any obligation to pay them taxes since they didn't feel represented by their government. This kind of got on the king's last nerve, and he started jailing some, and he shipped a whole bunch of them over to some worthless piece of land in this place called Penn's Woods, which became Pennsylvania. And they found this city called Philadelphia, which is the city of brotherly love. And these Quakers all gathered together in this area. And the king is thinking, well, you know, they're far away, they're not going to cause me any trouble. That was his oops moment. The king really blew it there, because he sent over all these rabble-rousers, and they were getting together, and they wanted to form their own government. And they didn't want a king, and they wanted representation, and they wanted one man, one vote, and they wanted a government of, by, and for the people. And they got it. And so that was some of the foundation of our country, was these people saying we're all equal. And that it all grew out of that. They also really cared about separation of church and state because of the problem with the king and the Archbishop of Canterbury, and so they made sure that was in there. And there is freedom to practice any religion or no religion as you choose, because individual choice matters. Activism. We believe in nonviolence. We are pacifists. We believe war is wrong. We are all brethren. To kill another is to destroy what God created and to harm yourself. Quakers have the individual choice written into law by us to be conscientious objectors. This made us very briefly popular during Vietnam. Many Quakers do serve in the military because personal conscience and personal choice are also intrinsic Quaker values. Quakers do not tell others what to think or do. They let their life speak. Passive resistance. It is not passive. It is a radical act of conscience. To stand up to do the right thing, to refuse to follow laws that are morally wrong because they oppress people. A Quaker must follow his conscience first and not the law. Gandhi and Martin Luther King studied this philosophy with the Quakers, and they used it effectively in their profound, peaceful, and powerful demonstrations against oppression. Nelson Mandela was not a Quaker, but he let his life speak in a very Quaker sort of way. Rosa Parks' small but world-changing act of defiance to sit in the front of a box. Those young folks who were beaten for sitting at a whites-only lunch counter, and they did not fight back. That is passive resistance. It is letting your life speak. Quakers were influential in ending slavery. The Underground Railroad used Quaker homes and meeting houses as safe havens. Suffragettes. My great-great-aunt Helen was BFF with Susan B. Anthony, and Susan B. used to come over and bounce my grandmother on her knee, and I still have a precious little teacup that was given to my great-aunt Helen by Susan B. Anthony. They were very instrumental in voting rights in every case that there has been an issue. What else do we do? Equality. Quakers sent medical aid to North and South Vietnam. This caused a whole bunch of noise at the time, but they felt that human suffering is human suffering. And that was a way of trying to help. Equality is the backbone, be it LGBT issues, immigration, war, civil rights, women's rights. If you find a peaceful demonstration, you're likely to find some Quakers. I was born a Quaker, I'm a seeker. I've always known I was connected to spirit, and my family accepted and encouraged this. My dad joked that we did not need a telephone, and we would use telepathy and the clairs, and we considered this normal in my family. And I met Panchen Lama, the Dalai Lama's brother, when I was 15. He had lectured on Tibet. Afterwards, he took my hands, and he stared into my eyes, and he said, "Child, you have the gift," and he opened something in my third eye that was just an epiphany for me. And I've studied spiritualism, and I've been finding it really, really valuable. I study quantum physics and astrophysics. I meet astronauts and scientists and rock stars in my work, and I intuit that quantum physics and metaphysics are both accelerating from different directions towards the same epiphany, which is that still small voice that George Fox heard, that still small voice that 3-year-old me heard when I stood up in a meeting and I spoke. I said, "God is love, I am love, and I love you all." Well, I'm here today, and I love you all, and you are all God. A little anecdote about my family. My mother wrote a book, and it is called 500 Years of Quaker Grandparents. And it's extensively researched, and she went to meeting houses in Wales and England and all over the country. They keep great records, so she found a lot of work. Well, I was going to take my family on a vacation, and for some reason, I picked Tortola. And my mother said, "Why Tortola?" And I said, "I don't know. It just jumped off the map at me." And she says, "Well, I know why you picked Tortola, because your 7th great grandfather was buried there in Fat Hogs Bay in a little Quaker settlement, and I need you to go over there and take pictures for me." And I'm like, "All right, well, that's my mother." Okay, fine. So we go to Tortola, which is very quiet, tiny little island in the British Virgins, and it's lovely. And I'm thinking, my mother, okay, fine. Well, I meet this guy who takes tourists around the islands, and he's this big black guy named Julian. And I say, "Julian, I need to go to Fat Hogs Bay." And he went, "Fat Hogs Bay? It's not even on the maps. Only the locals know about Fat Hogs Bay. Why do you want to go there? And I said, well, because there's a Quaker meeting house, and my 7th grade grandfather's buried there, and my mother's writing a book. And he's like, what's your grandfather's name? And I said, William Walton. And he goes, cousin! And he picks me up. He said, wait till you meet your other cousins. Michael, come here. Michael owns the rum still. Cousins! And so, boom, here I am in Tortola. Everybody there is related to everybody because it's a tiny island. And suddenly, I have this immediate family, and they treat me like I was born there, and all these people want to come and talk story and share their story because their roots are now my roots. And it was just amazing. And my mother got the story, but I didn't tell her about the rum still. A couple of famous Quakers: James Dean, Nixon, Herbert Hoover, Edward R. Murrow, Annie Oakley, which surprised me, Joan Baez, Daniel Boone, Judi Dench, Bonnie Raitt, and the man who painted this picture, which is one of my favorite pictures, and I didn't know this when I bought it. Dogs playing poker. So I have some pictures and artifacts in my mother's book. This is a very plain baby quilt. We are very plain. This is a very plain robe, a blanket. This is the Quaker style. Here's some baby clothes, you know, all very simple stuff. Any questions?
How did the name Quaker originate?
Okay, the Quakers, the name came about because the meeting houses are very basic and they were drafty, and these people would sit in, our service can last from 40 minutes to a couple hours depending on the mood, and they would sit there so long and in such concentration, and they would go in and out of trance, and some of them would start to shake. And so they became called the Quakers, but were actually the Religious Society of Friends.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
Do you believe in original sin?
No, because we're all born of God. No, actually, original sin and baptism were things that Quakers do not do, because baptism would be to say, well, you know, my heaven is better than your heaven, which is not a Quaker thing. As far as others, we're nominally Christians, so we celebrate Christmas and the other holidays, but in a very low-key way.
Without the representation of clergy, are you underrepresented, like in situations as like chaplains in the military, or hospital chaplains, or wedding ceremonies and funerals, and how is that done, I guess?
I don't know about the chaplain thing, but I can tell you about the weddings and funerals because they're kind of great. We have elders. The church is set up with benches out there, very hard benches, and everybody sits there, and then there's facing benches, which are also hard, but they have backs, and the elders get to sit there with the benches with the back. Now, the elders are there because they're elder. They still don't have any more power than the rest. If you want to get married, you go and you ask the elders, and they will record it, and they will witness, and they will sign the document to make it legal, but they don't officiate. The couple stands up, and they say, I wed thee, I wed thee. They're married, everybody goes and eats, you know, food time. Funerals, there's a service, worship, which is the meditation, and then one at a time, people will stand up as they would in a meeting and tell a story or share a memory and talk about their loved one. There is no officiant, there's no, you know, there's no eulogy sort of thing. It's kind of like a Irish wake without the whiskey.
Okay. And the chaplain, you're not sure about?
I don't know about the chaplains. I don't know how you could be a Quaker chaplain, because you have to be clergy.
Mm-hmm.
I could ask my dad, but he's in spirit, so I don't know the answer. As for not having clergy, that is so intrinsic to what George Fox wanted, which was to get back to the roots and to make everyone equal. And the duties of the church, like calling the plumber or getting the roof fixed, are handled by committees. My mother is 95, and she still goes to Gwynedd meeting, where 7 generations of our family are buried in that graveyard there, behind that church. And they have a committee there called Driving Miss Dottie, and they come and pick up my mother and take her to meeting and take her home. And the last time I went with my mother, she gave me permission to sit in the facing benches, which was kind of an honor, and also made me realize that I've got getting old.
So what does a Quaker gathering entail? Is there like a certain structure that they,
Yeah.
that they follow?
It's actually very similar to what you folks do,
Mhm.
except that the service, instead of being guided, is a silent meditation. We will come together and some have hymns, some don't. You know, a couple churches, some meeting houses use them, some don't. Someone will get up and close the doors, and that is a signal that the meeting has started, and everybody will suddenly just go into meditation, and it can last 40 minutes, it can last longer, and we just sit there and we silently meditate, and the silence and the stillness are extremely important. And unlike a lot of the focused meditation I've been learning how to do, it is more of a listening than an asking. It's a very passive listening to see what's gonna come. And if people get messages, just like in a spiritual group, they will stand up and talk. And I think that Aunt Sarah, maybe she was channeling Percy by Shelley from the other side. I think Shelley might have been her views. But they get up and they will speak whatever is in their heart.
When they get up and speak, are other people still in meditation? when they get up
Everybody's
and
in
speak?
meditation. We're all in meditation.
Okay.
And I get up and I say, God is love. And I sit back down. And it doesn't interrupt the flow, and your message is supposed to increase the intimacy with God for everyone. And it's not like you would give a personal message. Like I was telling you earlier, if I had asked my grandfather to talk to Spirit for me, he said, what's wrong with you? Go do it yourself. And he would have sat with me and he would have showed me how to do it, but he would not have done it for me. Yes?
I just wonder, since you're nominal Christians, what is the Quaker belief on heaven and hell? Just for interesting.
Well, I really didn't think there was hell or evil until I'd gotten out in the world and met some bad people.
Yeah.
They really don't talk about heaven and hell. They do believe that you go, the spirit lives on because we're talking to spirit. But they think it's all one place. And everybody's welcome, and it doesn't matter if you were born in Borneo or New York City, you're all in the same place when you pass on. That's the general gist of it. And I am hardly an expert.
So,
Really are.
yes, so you implied that Quaker beliefs and principles transferred into the US Constitution. Can you expand on that?
Well, the Quaker beliefs were the separation of church and state, freedom of religions, personal choice, equality, one person, one vote. Slavery is wrong, war is wrong. War, we didn't win that battle, but we did put in the conscientious objector clause, and I know a great many Quakers who used it and a great many who did not, and Vietnam was a real test of that. Does that answer your question?
I don't know if you can mention maybe a famous Quaker that signed the Constitution or.
Honestly, I would have to look it up.
Okay. Alright.
Don't tell my mother.
Sherry knows.
Herbert Hoover, one of the presidents, was a Quaker, and there were a great many Quakers. Well, Ben Franklin was not a Quaker, oddly enough, but there were a great many Quakers who were involved in this. And Philadelphia was actually where the first conference was held, and that was a Quaker city. That's history that I would have to brush up on. Yes, sir.
I'll go ahead and answer a few of those questions. I am also many generations in this country, and thank you for sharing part of the history. We also were very much involved in the education system and the original justice system in the United States. They were very adamant about being peaceful. There are no clergy in the series that we follow, though the other side does have some clergy, and they do spend time in hospitals and such. But most of us can go into a hospital and greet and meet, because most hospitals are open to let us come in and talk with members and whatnot and give prayer and guidance, so.
Yes, and.
I am part of the Hawkshurst family of Long Island and Virginia.
Well, you might enjoy looking at my mother's book because, oh, I forgot to show you. My mother, who obviously has a very big brain and could run a big city if she hadn't been born at a time when women were doing those things. This is my mother's genealogy. And she has this completely full to about 7 generations, but in a couple lines she went all the way back to King Henry and King John, the Welsh kings, and Charlemagne.
Oh,
That's kinda
wow.
cool.
And,
They're
and
not a
there
cousin.
is, supposedly, I have not been able to find it, but it's in the material that Samuel Hawkshurst was one of the signers in either the Declaration or, one of those original ones.
Well, my family came over on a welcome, and I'm a member of the Welcome Society. That was one of the votes, and it was, I don't know the exact dates because I don't care about those things, but my mother does.
But thank you anyway.
You're welcome.
I just looked it up, and there's William Penn. He was
Yes.
one of the founders of
William
Rome.
Penn was the founder of Pennsylvania. He was a wealthy English landlord owner, and my family has a personal land grant from William Penn to a piece of Penn's Woods. And my mother, they keep meticulous notes, and my mother is even more meticulous. When I had to move her into extended care, I had 95 boxes of records.
Wow.
It was pretty overwhelming.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, well, we're gonna wrap the question and answer up.